You know, back in 2001, Tom Brokaw wrote a book about the men and women who survived the Great Depression, won World War II, and then built the strongest post-war economy that the world had ever seen. He called that book The Greatest Generation. And this was the generation of my parents, some of your grandparents. This is what he had to say about them.
I think this is the greatest generation any society ever produced. I know it was a bold statement and a sweeping judgment, but I went on to make my case, and I believe I have the facts on my side.
Well, that is a bold statement, to say it's the greatest generation any society has ever produced, and it's very subjective, but it got me to thinking, what would be the greatest generation of American educators we've ever had in this country? And here, there's no subjectivity involved. The answer is evident. The greatest generation of educators this country has ever seen is you. And there's no question about this. Last year, our high school graduation rate topped 80% for the first time in American history. We have more students taking more rigorous curriculum than ever before in the history of this country. 1 out of every 5 high school seniors graduated with college credit because they're pursuing such challenging curriculum. And the percentage of students from low SES families has increased 400% in terms of access to that rigorous curriculum. We've been given the National Assessment of Educational Progress since the 1970s, and every time we've given that test, our scores have gone up from the previous years, and until they hit the highest scores ever, the last time the test was given was 2013. The TIMSS International Test in Math and Science tests students around the world. We score in the top 10 in both math and science with a score that far exceeds the international average. The Gallup poll has been polling parents for over 40 years, asking them to grade their local school. And if you looked at 5-year chunks, what's the highest percentage of parent satisfaction ever? It's the last 5 years in American history. And the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development has surveyed students on their perception of their relationships with their teachers, and American teachers had the highest percentage of student satisfaction of any teachers in the world. 86% of them said that you care about them and their well-being. 90% said they treat you fairly, you treat them fairly. And 90% said you are willing to give of your own time to give them extra help. And just to give you a basis of comparison, 90% of American students said that. 28% of Japanese students said their teachers were willing to give them extra time and support. So before we go any further, can we just stop for a minute? And would you actually rise and join me in celebrating what is clearly the greatest generation of American educators this country has ever seen? Thank you very much. Now, I know we have some educators here from Shanghai and from Canada. Shanghai is consistently one of the top scoring countries in the world on international exams. Canada has done extremely well on international exams. They have the highest percentage of women college graduates of any country in the advanced economies, and they've got the best career to tech ed program of any of the countries in the world. So let's hear it for Canada and Shanghai, too. We don't hear this enough. We hear our schools are failing constantly. We don't hear the great things that are going on, the unprecedented levels of student achievement that we're getting. But can we also agree that we still need to improve? It's imperative that we improve because the consequences of failure in school have never been as dire as they are right now. In the 60s, the 70s, you could be a high school dropout and still have access to the American dream. That's no longer the case. We have a greater need for effective teaching in effective schools than we've ever had in the history of this country. And so our nations around the world are looking at ways to improve their school. And the state and federal governments have a legitimate interest in saying, what can we do to improve? In our country, they're very upset because on the PISA exam, an international exam given to 15-year-olds, we're scoring in the middle of the pack. And they want us to score at the top. They want us to score like Singapore or Finland. Why can't we be more like Finland, they ask. And so, they've come up with some strategies to help us become one of the highest performing countries in the world. Let's examine some of the strategies that currently are at work to improve American schools. First, they say, let's increase the competitive pressure on public schools. Let's make it easier for parents to send their kids out of the public schools, and that will, as students leave, the public school educators will recognize we need to shape up. So we're going to increase vouchers, charter schools to put competitive pressure on schools. Let's enact the law to punish schools that are failing. And then let's rig that law to ensure that every school in America will be a failing school at some point. Let's make it easier to fire educators. Let's take away tenure. Let's dismiss principals. Let's make it easier to bring non-educators into schools to replace them. Let's close the lowest performing schools in every state, the bottom 5%. And let's offer some financial incentives to a few teachers if their students perform well on standardized tests. The theory here is that if you're guaranteed to make $40,000 a year, you won't be motivated to work hard. But if you have a 1 in 5 chance to make $45,000 a year, you're going to knock yourself out because it's the big bucks that drew you into education in the first place. Now, these strategies are going to help us become one of the highest performing nations in the world if certain assumptions are correct. For example, one of the assumptions here apparently is that educators have always had the ability to help kids achieve at higher levels. They just haven't been sufficiently motivated to do so. And so if we increase the competitive pressure, they'll shape up and start helping kids achieve at higher levels. Now, I don't know about you, but I've never heard a teacher say, I know how to teach this skill really, really well, but it takes an awful lot of effort and energy. And it's only October, and I don't want to peak too soon and give away my really good stuff. So I'm going to go with my mediocre strategies. No, my observation is that teachers are doing the best they can. They're using the very best strategies that they have, and threatening them if they don't do better probably isn't going to accomplish much. These strategies will work if carrots and sticks, incentives and punishment, work to motivate knowledge workers. Here's the assumption here. Let's be honest. Most of those policies are based on a policy of fear. We're going to fire you. We're going to close your school. We're going to take away your tenure. If you don't shape up, all these bad sanctions and punishments are going to happen to you. Now, I've got a video that doesn't really have anything to do with education, but I think it will resonate with educators because it's very, very familiar based on some of the NCLB and race to the top parameters.
Every executive knows that employees love to complain, and they will continue to complain as long as two conditions exist. One, they believe they have a legitimate complaint.
They're 5 years old now and they're starting to get a little unstable.
Really? They work though, right? And two, they believe that somebody cares and is listening to their complaints. Well, in the art of motivation, I give executives a strategy for dealing with employee complaints, and it's something that we put in place at DuFour Incorporated. It's called an It Can Be Worse program, and it's designed to delegitimize employee complaints. I was beginning to get complaints from employees in the DuFour call center about their headsets.
Well, what kind of complaints?
Well, it was just the normal kind of stuff. For example, I had another employee who was complaining because he said that he was getting shocked while he used the headset.
Go to the warehouse and ship it. Sorry about that. A little hardware problem. But
it was really just the normal kinds of things that...
Wait a minute, he was being shocked?
Well, I mean, it's only 9 volts. I mean, he acted like it was a taser or something. It was really not a very big deal.
9 volts is enough to hurt. If you put a 9-volt battery to your tongue, it hurts.
Well, the headset's not on their tongue, though. It's on their ear, and there are fewer nerve endings in their ear. And so I really don't think it's a very big deal.
Okay, my point is just that his complaint was legitimate.
Well, the good news is, though, that it really doesn't matter whether or not the complaint was legitimate or not, because an It Could Be Worse program works whether the complaint is legitimate or illegitimate. So what I chose to do is I got a brochure from an outsourced call center. I placed the brochure right on the table in the break room where they would easily find it. Survey says, problem solved. Imagine it didn't take very long before the rumors began to spread throughout the organization that I was going to outsource the call center.
What is fun sourcing? I'm worried about this for us.
Oh, this sucks. Oh, I'm sorry, not you.
As a result, complaints about headsets have virtually stopped. Something as simple as setting a free brochure in a public area was a very effective strategy that saved me thousands of dollars because it reminded employees that it really could be worse. And if they didn't stop complaining, it probably would be worse.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Now, this strategy of fear to motivate people, according to Daniel Pink, in very compelling research, has an adverse impact on motivation for knowledge workers. And when W. Edward Demings worked with Japan to transform their economy by making it one of focused on continuous improvement, he identified certain principles that had to be in place, and one of the first principles was eliminate fear. But we're not eliminating fear in American education, we're fostering it. These strategies are going to help us improve our school if closing the worst schools in every state will motivate the other schools to strive for excellence. But if you set a policy that says we're going to close the worst 5% of schools in every state, the goal isn't excellence, the goal becomes avoid being in the bottom 5%, right? It's sort of like the story we've all heard of the two runners or two walkers who come across a bear on a path, and it's impossible to outrun a bear. They run 40 miles an hour. And so the runners recognize that the goal is not to outrun the bear. The goal is I just need to outrun you. We're trying to make sure that we're not in that bottom 5%. But the irony is there will be a bottom 5% every year. Now, there are those who say don't outrun the bear, confront the bear. Here's a video.
At the river mouth, the bears catch only the tastiest, most tender salmon, which is exactly what we at John West want.
I don't recommend that. And these strategies are going to work if they've been proven successful in other high-performing countries. If, after all, they want us to perform like Finland, we should look to see, well, what are the strategies that Finland is using to get the great results that they're getting? The irony is there is no evidence that any of the reform strategies that dominate the scene in the United States are being used by any of the high-performing countries anywhere in the world. Unless you think that NCLB has helped us achieve the high levels of achievement that we've got going in 2014, the rates of student improvement in every indicator that I shared with you were rising faster prior to NCLB than since NCLB. We're doing better in spite of the punitive laws that are being forced on us rather than because of the punitive laws. If they really want us to be like Finland, maybe we should look to see, well, what does Finland do? Well, for example, Finland's teachers must complete a master's degree before they even step into a classroom. In the United States, we've adopted policies that says you too can be a teacher in 6 weeks. How demeaning to our profession. In Finland, the government is going to pay your entire cost of your undergraduate and master's degree. In the United States last year, the average college graduate graduated $29,000 in debt. In Finland, when I get my first teaching job, I make 109% of what the average of other bachelor's degrees are making. In the United States, we earn 68% of what other countries are making, and that's a full 20% lower than the international average of advanced economies. Maybe we should look to see some of the things that Finland is doing. Here's another quality that Finland has going for it. Only 3% of the students in Finland are living in poverty. In the United States, according to the way OECD calculates poverty, we have 22% living in poverty, the highest percentage in the world by far. And you probably heard earlier this year, for the first time in our history, the majority of students in American public schools are eligible for free and reduced lunch. Now, 20% of American schools have over 75% of their students living in poverty. And if you just compared American schools with 10% poverty or less to Finland, we blow Finland away. Our achievement scores are significantly higher. So we could be tempted to say, well, this isn't an education problem, it's a poverty problem. And until we solve poverty, there's no reason to expect better results. But what a cop-out that would be. Because if education isn't the primary tool for lifting people out of poverty, what is? We need to do a better job of meeting the needs of the students who need us most.